Trey comes to the top. Hayward on a tight curl. Catch and shoot. Fading back. Swish! A career high. 35 for Gordon Hayward. And the crowd comes to its feet in admiration. Hello, welcome to Tip Off today on a Tuesday, July 1st. The madness has begun. Free agency is upon us. We'll still look at some draft stuff, and we'll look at the NBA free agency. I'm David Locke. It is Tip Off. How? Hello, how are you? I'm David Locke, radio voice of the Utah Jazz. You can follow me on Twitter at LockedOnSports. Thanks so much for tuning in today. I had a stunner yesterday, a real stunner. I got a tip that we, as the Locked On Jazz podcast, were the second most listened to sports podcast on Stitcher last week. We've been 11th the week before, which I thought was stunning. We were number 2, I guess, worldwide, I guess. I mean, it's hard to fathom. MMA's number 1 podcast, World Cup's number 1 podcast were behind us. Slate's Hang Up and Listen, I catch every week behind us. The Starters on NBA.com, the kind of the universal daily NBA national podcast behind us. Stunned, absolutely stunned. Thank you so much. I don't even know what to say. I'm kind of overwhelmed by it, particularly actually yesterday on a day where I couldn't have been more tired. Like I clearly woke up yesterday still with draft hangover and couldn't have been more fried. So I'm honored. I'm flabbergasted. I'm blown away. I'm thankful. So incredible, cool, actually, really cool from that. So also what that means is there's a bunch of new people that have never listened to this thing that have tuned in. So here's who we are. I'm David Locke. I do the radio for the Utah Jazz. These people in the bottom are like our good friends that hang out with us. What we do is we hang out every morning. I have my coffee. You have whatever you have. Today's is an Ethiopian pour over. I'm a coffee crazy person. I don't drink anymore, so I do that. It's my wine. I chip in my beans. And so we have coffee in the morning, and we talk NBA. We talk NBA with a Jazz emphasis, but I would hope that if you're an NBA I would hope if you're an NBA fan that you feel like you get a lot of coverage. You definitely would learn a lot about the Jazz. That's our focus, unquestionably, but we hit on a lot of NBA stuff. So that's who we are. We try to do this every morning. We will take a little break coming up here, which is too bad with those kind of numbers. July 7th through the 17th, I will have some of my stuff with me, but I'm going on vacation with the family, and I need to do those kind of things so that I have a family. But if news breaks during that period of time that's significant, I'll either do short little snippets or just audio podcasts as well. You can follow the audio podcast on Stitcher at Locked On Jazz. YouTube, we do the video version every day, and we do drop in little visuals for you. It's on iTunes on Locked On Jazz. So thank you. Appreciate it. And for all of you who've been with us the whole time, I really appreciate it, and I hope the goal when this first started, we did this little thing. I think we're close. Someone probably would have to tell me. Feel free, if anyone knows, when do we actually start this? We probably should backtrack and figure out what episode we're at and all sorts of fun stuff like that. I think we're into our third off-season. Last off-season was a little sketchy. It was a year ago yesterday, by the way, that I left on the 51-day RV trip across America. So anyway, for those of you who have tuned in the whole time, I actually feel like I know who you guys are at this point, and feel like we all have a little relationship. I appreciate it because you've really helped build something that obviously has hit heights we never imagined. So anyway, let's get to it. Let's talk free agency for the Jazz, and then we'll talk about my ideal scenario. Then we'll talk about Gordon Hayward. And then we'll talk about news around the league. That's the plan. Then I'll answer your questions. If you're a national NBA fan that's tuned into this, the question and answer session on the YouTube tip-off page is probably the best way to get, if you have a specific question you need in, go for it that way. All right, so we've got 3 choices in free agency. We can take, post Hayward, right now we have about $24 million of cap space is the way I look at it. If we let Hayward go, we'd have about 30. We're not doing that. So we could take our $24 million and we could go after the big boys. And I've got the list of free agents. I'll show it to you. I have finalized um, my my list of free agencies for you. But we could go after the big boys and and try to sign one of those guys if we wanted to. And let's do it. Let's just take a second right now and look at the free agent. I have it finalized, so I don't have the teams. These are this is final and correct and been double and triple checked. What I have not done yet is the team stuff. So if you look around, the point guards that are available, Bledsoe and Kyle Lowry are tier one. Thomas, Patty Mills, Sean Livingston, probably Jameer Nelson are tier two, though Nelson could slide. And then the next guys and you could argue with them on this. This is all subjective. Collison, Vasquez, Nate Robinson coming off the ACL, Jordan Farmar, Devin Harris, Mario Chalmers, Kirk Heinrich, Mo Williams. Mo Williams is being talked about wanting to go to Dallas, but so is Devin Harris. And then you've got the rest of the guys. Ramon Sessions could probably get over here. Blake could probably get over here. Um, those are and so the Jazz need, from a Jazz standpoint, the Jazz need a veteran backup point guard. Luke Ridnour to me seems kind of interesting. If possible, I've always liked Luke. I think he'd be very good helping young players. Steve Blake probably wants to play a little bit more and win. Falls off pretty fast, doesn't it? There's Kirk Heinrich would be ideal. I'll show you that scenario in a second. Not sure he'd be up for that. But it falls off pretty quickly. There are just not a lot of veteran point guards, and that's where John Lucas's possibility of staying hits. The next thing is your shooting guards. This is where Wade, Stevenson, and Hayward are tier one. Parsons and Bradley are tier two. By the way, everybody, Gordon Hayward's much better than Chandler Parsons. And the constant comparison of them, they're white. That's it. Their games aren't similar. They're not used similarly. Their height might be similar. They're American. They're white. They went to college. They have parents. They play basketball. One is a spot-up shooter. The other plays with the ball in his hands. They're not similar at all. Trevor Ariza and Chandler Parsons are more similar than Gordon Hayward and Chandler Parsons. Ariza's a spot-up shooter. Occasionally plays with the ball in his hands, but not very often. Gordon is more similar to Lance Stevenson, frankly, than he is to Chandler Parsons. Elite athlete, plays with the ball in his hands, creates for his teammates, rebounds. It's not similar. Stop with that. And it's interesting to me from a Jazz fan standpoint of how we clearly just, we have this, some people have this phenomenon. Some people, I got to be careful with the vocal minority in the world of Twitter is so dang powerful that the biggest idiot can link together 140 characters with usually 4 grammatical errors, 3 misspellings, all in 140 characters, and then we react to it. It's insanity. And I'm as bad as anyone else about it, but it's, it shouldn't, we don't need to do it. But anyway, so this is the group, and then tier 3 is Carter Young, which I have no interest in. Mike Miller's going to stay in Memphis. CJ's talking to Indiana. Ray Allen, Rodney Stuckey, Cephalosa Turner, and then you've got your guys over here. It'll be interesting to see what happens with Jimmer. He may end up in Europe. Small forwards, you got LeBron and Carmelo. You got Dang, Ariza, and Sean Marion. Then you have Paul Pierce, Al Farouk Aminu, who I kind of like, but not as a big money guy. Tucker, Butler, and Granger. And I didn't want to have a tier 4, but I thought these guys were all different. And then you've got your next group over here. Well, out of this group somewhere, the Jazz have to find a shooting veteran wing. So Jody Meeks and Anthony Morrow sound appealing to me. Maybe Francisco Garcia, but I'm not sure if that's what you're looking for. I'm looking around. Nothing else seems to engage with me here a great deal. Trevor Ariza, the Jazz are being talked about. Ariza is an interesting conversation. I guess it's if we were to lose Gordon Hayward in some capacity, we go sign Trevor Ariza. But if you sign Trevor Ariza, he's expecting to play 25, 30 minutes a night. Between Burke, Exum, and Hayward, where's 30 minutes a night? I'm not sure I see where that is taking place, that you're getting 30 minutes a night out of any of these players. That seems, we can talk more about that. Anyway, so That's that list. There's not much there. Power forwards, just we don't need one, but Dirk, Chris Bosh, Pau Gasol, Boris Diaw. And then we want to stretch four, and I think this is your list. Ed Davis, probably not, but Mike Davis, Josh McRoberts, Patrick Patterson, Marvin Williams, Channing Frye, Trevor Booker, maybe Glenn Davis. Over here on the list of second-round guys, so I had Glenn Davis over here twice. Um, Not a lot of list of guys that are second-tier bigs. Ryan Kelly has been mentioned. The Jazz makes some sense. Very young player. Um, Centers of Gortat, Monroe, Spencer Haas would be certainly interesting to the Jazz, but he seems to be under high demand. Okafor, Kaman, Bargnani, Serafin. I don't know what to do with Bynum, and then the rest of this. So with that said, here's what the Jazz plan is. So if you're the Jazz, you either one go after a big boy, one of these tier one guys and try to get them. Seems unlikely. Number two is you go and try to use your cap money, that 21 million, to go spend to go get Spencer Haas. If Spencer Haas is going to get $7 million from Portland, you offer him $9 million and see if he's in for the money. You've got to decide what that does to your roster. Frankly, on draft day, we got better adding Rodney Hood and Dante Exum. I'm not sure that we added a win to our roster, though. If we have added a win to our roster, we have added the win by adding Quinn Snyder, and if his systems turn out to be better for these guys and use our players better, then that's where we're going to add our wins. But Dante Exum's not someone who I would expect to add wins to our franchise right away. So we're still hovering on the bottom half of things and probably still developing talent is our primary job, particularly with a new head coach. So who do you go sign? Do you go sign Josh McRoberts and he goes takes Enes Kanter's minutes? Because frankly, McRoberts and Favors are probably better on the floor in some ways than Kanter and Favors. Does McRoberts and Gobert could probably, or what do you do? I think we've got to look at that a little bit when you suddenly start. That's where a Ryan Kelly or a Mike Scott or someone like that might be actually a better selection for the Jazz because that player is able to, and you don't have to use your money on that, and that player is able to come in, doesn't threaten the minutes of Kanter and Favors. The other angle on this, which I have often felt, is, if we go sign Josh McRoberts and he's better than Kanter, then too bad for Kanter. Then buck up. To some extent, buck up. You've been in the league long enough. You got to learn the game. You got to learn where to set your picks. You got to learn how to play. And if you don't, that's too bad. You got to run in transition. Then you don't play. That's your value problem, not ours. Some of this idea that we just give these guys, I'm just not always a believer in that they just get to go out there and make their mistakes. Step up. Be good enough. If you're not, you're not. It's too bad for us. So that's our options. Go to the big boys. I don't think we can get the big boys to come play for us when we have a 25-win team. Outspend some people for some pieces that increase our value and get us going a little bit. Don't outspend people and let our young guys continue to develop for another year under a new head coach, which may be the right option. And the third one is, here's my dream scenario. And this is where, from a Jazz standpoint, or even if you have a tie to probably Philadelphia and Orlando, or maybe the only other teams that I think could probably pull this off. And I'm not even sure that Orlando could pull this off right now, considering just some of the things I'm hearing of where their fan base is. So at some point, the Jazz have this cap space, and the way we used it last year was to absorb the money from the Warriors to allow them to go get Andre Iguodala. We took Andres Biedrins, Richard Jefferson, and Brandon Rush and put them into that cap space. We absorbed contracts, we'll call them. And by absorbing contracts, the Jazz are able to then get assets. So and that's a possibility. As we follow the big name, teams are going to have to clear some space. New Orleans actually needs to clear some space right now to get the Omer Asik deal done. I don't think they have to clear a lot. I think they can do it fairly easily, but it's worth keeping an eye on. Ryan Anderson was obviously worked to our shooting big. He would play a lot. Probably start for us. Now, the Jazz have somewhere in the range of, as we've talked about, 21, maybe $30 million of cap space. But let's call it in more of the range of right now. It's about 22 million of cap space. The Bulls, if the Bulls were able to pull in Carmelo, They could amnesty Carlos Boozer, but they're then paying for Boozer. And Jerry Reinsdorf doesn't like to necessarily do that. So here's my dream scenario. Boozer get the Jazz acquire in this offseason Carlos Boozer, Mike Dunleavy, and Kirk Heinrich. It comes out to about 22 million of contracts. The Bulls go down to 46 million in cap space. They have 19 million in cap space. Now they can go sign Carmelo and probably add another piece as well. The Jazz, in exchange, under my dream scenario, pick up probably a 2018 first round draft pick. So then we would have two in 2017 because of the Warriors, in 2018 because of the Bulls. And in addition to that, the Bulls have the best European prospect in basketball on their roster, originally drafted by Houston, picked up by the Bulls in a trade. And he's a pretty nice player. His name is Mirotic, Nikolai Mirotic, and he's 6'11". He's a shooting four, fits our roster perfectly. He's 23 years old. I've been told he could start in the NBA right now. Last year he averaged 16 points, not a rebounder, averaged 5 rebounds a game, shot 51%, 46% from three, and 81% from the free throw line. He at one point in his career shot 90% from the free throw line. It's an incredible touch. I haven't seen a lot of him. He was the second team All-Euro League. He was the U20 MVP. He's the Bulls' best asset that they have. So could the Jazz make a deal where they absorb $22 million in contracts, similar to what they did last year, take Dunleavy and Heinrich? Dunleavy has 2 years left, and frankly, Dunleavy becomes I like both these players. Dunleavy becomes my veteran wing player to help develop Rodney Hood and be with Gordon. And I think Gordon and Mike Dunleavy are actually very similar players in their careers. And then Kirk Heinrich becomes a guard for you. I would guess over time you have to move Kirk Heinrich because I think he's better than being a third big for the Utah Jazz in a developmental season. But that's my perfect scenario for the offseason. It's interesting how we now think about that. Last year at this time, I don't think many of us thought about the idea of absorbing contracts, but that would be it. And now, understand what that means. That probably leaves us Boozer. We would either move on or amnesty, or I don't know. Maybe he'd be our scorer, depending what the franchise wants to do. He would help us win games. But I think that the idea there to me solves all of your needs. It gets you a 3 in Dunleavy. It gets you a backup of Heinrich. It gets you a future asset in Mirotic, and it gets you a future first-round pick. I mean, it'd be a steal. Orlando and Philadelphia. If you here, run down this with me. Tell me if I'm misreading this. I don't have a lot of inside scoop. So here are the other teams that have cap space that could do something of that sort. Miami, they're not going to. They're signing the place. Phoenix, I don't see them doing that kind of deal right now. They seem to be in the win mode, looking to sign free agents. Philadelphia certainly could do that deal. Would be tough competition for us and probably could take a little more money. Utah could do it. Orlando at 28 million could do it. Now, what's interesting on Orlando, are they willing? There's a little bit more pressure there to win right now from the Magic on things. So we'll see how that plays. Dallas could do it, but I don't have the feeling that Dallas is rolling in that direction. I think Dallas is interviewing Carmelo this week and talking to Devin Harrison players. They're trying to keep Dirk going. I think they have a hard time looking at Dirk. The Lakers could do it, probably should do it, but I would be surprised if the Lakers are willing to go that direction. It sounds much more to me as though the Lakers are in a position where they are trying to sign players to 1 or 2 year deals and move it. Detroit would be right on the edge, but again, I'd be surprised if that's Stan Van Gundy's first move. So to me, the teams that can pull this off are Orlando, Philadelphia, or Utah. It's not a bad position to be in if you're Utah. Now, there's 3 teams that can do it, which is more than there used to be. But to me, that's not a bad position to be in. I think that's our best approach here in free agency, is to absorb, not to sign the big boys, not to sign, to absorb and to let the young players. If we don't, you let the young players go. Now, the one scenario here that gets kind of crazy is if all of a sudden the Jazz don't get this deal done, they don't have enough salary, and the Jazz would have to find a way to um, increase the salary structure to get to the league apron. So, all right, so that's the scenario, the best scenario I see for the offseason. We'll see whether that happens. The Jazz made their first call yesterday. It was to Gordon Hayward and Mark Bartelstein. Truly, you call Mark Bartelstein to reach Gordon Hayward. You don't call Gordon Hayward at this point. It's actually uncouth. The Jazz are going to continue to talk, and the Jazz goal would be to get a deal done with Hayward prior to him getting an offer sheet. Construct the deal, figure out his marketplace, see what's fair. Might be difficult. If there really is a max deal out there for Gordon Hayward, well, then his agent's going to want to keep him on the marketplace and see if he can get that offer sheet. If there's not a max deal for Gordon, the Jazz are going to continue to negotiate in good faith. There's not going to be this, I've been with an organization do this. Go get your offer, otherwise we'll see. And you prove your market value. I think that's an unfair and uncouth way to do things, and it does not sound as though the Jazz can do that. Who could get in on Hayward? Everyone wants to talk Suns and Celtics. The truth on the Celtics is they don't have the money to do it, and it's interesting to me that there was an early report on the Celtics that they were going to that they were talking with for Isaiah Thomas, because that would take up some of their money unless it's a Rondo trade, which it very well may be. So Boston only has $6.8 million. Atlanta is up to, I believe, with their latest trade, up to about $16 million. I think we're going to hear Atlanta to Gordon Hayward. He fits very well to what they do. The Wizards, I don't think are in, because by the time they have to re-sign Ariza and Gortat, but if they were to lose Ariza, they would have some money. Cleveland is a big possibility. They just signed Kyrie today, but Gordon does not like Cleveland at all. So I would be surprised if that happened. And frankly, if that was going to happen, I bet you it would have happened on some sort of weird deal in the trade period of time, because I think Gordon, that's where Cleveland wanted Gordon in some capacity. Charlotte's so we're down to Atlanta. Charlotte's a real possibility. They have $20 million in cap space. I would expect the Hornets to jump in on Gordon and I think be a real player. Detroit could be a real player here. Stan Van Gundy, the way he used Hito Turkoglu in Orlando. The Lakers have contacted Bartelstein already on Gordon. They have $28 million in cap space. So that's 4. Dallas, I wouldn't be surprised if they circle back. Orlando's a key one to watch, because I can't really figure out where they're going as a franchise. Are they trying to win suddenly under pressure? Then they could jump in. So that's 4, plus Phoenix with their massive amount of money. That's 5. And, I'm sure Miami, he's a pretty beautiful compliment to LeBron. Gordon on a team with good players would be just incredible. So I'm sure LeBron. So that's 6 teams that I'm sure are making inroads to Hayward. Now, the Jazz have done a nice job. The message is they're going to match. Everyone kind of knows it. And so the question is, how far is someone willing, of those 6 teams, is anyone willing to max him and make the Jazz really uncomfortable and possibly not do it? If you're just going to offer $12 million, then the Jazz are going to get the deal done with Gordon prior to the offer sheet, and maybe even delay it, because at that point the Jazz have $4 million of extra cap space possibly for a deal like the one we talked about with the Dunleavy-Heinrich type idea, if they wait to sign Gordon until after that deal's done. So watch Carmelo. Carmelo's really big, I think, for our offseason. Carmelo to Chicago is a good one for us. Chicago has to move stuff, and we're one of the 3 teams that can take those assets. Obviously, Orlando and Philadelphia could have a smaller bargain, and then we don't get it done. So keep an eye. That's where I think Gordon has his marketplace. As I said, the 3 things the Jazz want: veteran backup point guard. I think that's Luke Ridnour, maybe someone on another roster. I need to go. I have not devoured the other rosters yet and looked at it. John Lucas is under contract. John Lucas is nice because you can send John Lucas in that deal. For example, if let's say we sign Hayward to 12 and the Jazz cap space gets under the 22 on that deal, then you send Lucas in that deal. There's 1.8. The Jazz then non-guaranteed. They cut him, and then Lucas, you can get under it. Or you might have to move, ironically enough, you might have to move Jeremy Evans to create some space, which you'd be able to do. He has a second-round draft pick value. Shooting bigs: Spencer Hawes, Josh McRoberts, Patrick Patterson. Again, that then gets into the question of, do they take time from guys you want to take? Trevor Booker, Mike Scott, Ryan Kelly are tier 2 shooting bigs. Wings, I mentioned I like Mike Dunleavy. I think the best chance on here is some trade and cap movement of a player because the only wings that are available in free agency, and this is why Gordon's going to get paid, are Jody Meeks, Anthony Morrow, and Richard Jefferson. Um, and Marvin Williams, by the way, in the shooting bigs. I mean, there's a real chance Marvin Williams and Richard Jefferson both come back this year. All right, news out there. Irving is signed a max deal in Cleveland. C.J. Miles, just keeping an eye on an old friend, is meeting with Indiana. The Carmelo Tour is Chicago today, Dallas and Houston Wednesday, Lakers on Thursday. I still think Miami circulates back in this. By the way, everyone still talks about Carmelo going to New York, back to New York. Maybe, but he sits in Chicago, they have a better story to tell. He sits in Dallas, they have a better story to tell. He sits in Houston, they have a better story to tell. He sits in the Lakers, they have the same story to tell, but actually better. They have more cap space. And then they go to New York, they have no story to tell. I can't imagine why he goes back to New York. Boston, Isaiah Thomas, I mentioned, I think is interesting. And Haas already met with Portland. They're talking of 8 million on Haas. And so if we're going to go try to get a guy like Haas or McRoberts or someone like that, we've probably got to overpay to get him because of the fact that we're not as good as some of these teams and the experience is different. But there might be a nice argument of why you go pay a 2-year, bust it out for a 2-year big money $20 million deal or $22 million deal for some of these guys if you really want one of them and think it's going to help you and get, if it's important to get the win total up to 35 or something of that nature. So that's the latest stuff. Few other things. I've got the Locked On Jazz storyline going on that is posted for you. And just to quickly let me scan that. There were a bunch of stuff yesterday that happened. I think I've touched on all of it, but Atlanta talking with Lou Eldeng. I'd watch the Hawks closely because I think Atlanta could be a player for Gordon. Watch Charlotte as well, as I mentioned. Trevor Booker was mentioned by Michael Lee. I mentioned him there. Sorry, I'm just kind of running through whether there's any story here. The Carmelo thing I broke down for you yesterday, late last night. Lou Eldeng to Dallas. I think Hayward could circulate in Dallas too, by the way, and might be lured a little bit by the whole Mark Cuban ownership thing. Grass is always greener on the other side. I think Gordon could be susceptible to the grass is always greener on the other side, but the Jazz just match it. All right, let's run through your questions as we. Jonathan Erickson, Chad Ford talked about Dante Exum's mental makeup on the podcast with Bill Simmons. Said he's one of the closest things to Kobe from mental makeup and competitive nature they have seen. Do you follow the podcast with Chad to elaborate on that? Can you do? Yeah, I actually need to talk to Chad anyway on some other issues and just check in with him and see how he is. So that's an interesting comment. I heard it as well. We'll see. I'm not sure what. I don't know. It seems like a bit much to me. I mean, it's the same way Bill Simmons yesterday made the comment that Gordon's going to Cleveland. I don't know. I guess maybe sometimes maybe it'll change, but I know what Gordon has said about Cleveland in the past and thinks about Cleveland, and I can't imagine him deciding to spend 4 years of his life there. Is it possible Gordon Hayward's market value will never be higher than it is right now? If so, would the Jazz seriously consider looking at sign and trade options? I think there's a possibility that's true, except for the salary cap just continues to go up. It's going to go up next year. It's going to go big time 2 years after that. So I think that the numbers you sign him to right now are going to turn out to be all right in 2 years. But there's a chance. But I think he's a really good player, and I think he's a player who will get better as years go on. He's much more athletic than people realize. He's a great, he's a good dude. His body language sucked last year, but he was overwhelmed, lacked faith in what was going on, and it showed more than it should have. And that's probably a sign of maturity. And I think it'll develop. I think Gordon has better days ahead of him. I think he could be a really really good second or third player on a really good team. I mean, on a really good team. Are there other teams out there who could be looking to make cap space other than Chicago and Houston, maybe Boston, Rondo? Then you get a veteran backup point guard. Well, Rondo's not coming to be a veteran backup point guard, Patrick. There's just no way. Rondo is a starting point guard all-star in his mind, and he is a surly beep to beep. So he would not be the guy. I have not done my analysis of other teams yet, and it sometimes depends on the deal, right? Like, so a team like Atlanta that has a buttload of cap space, and I've done Atlanta, this is why I'm using this as an example. Atlanta has a buttload of cap space and should have all sorts of room to deal with something. Well, all of a sudden they need an extra, $4 million to get the second deal done on their deal, and so you end up, I don't know, in this case it would be Damari Carroll at 2.4 and Gustavon Ione at 1.8, and you take those guys and you move on, or maybe it's Puro Antic as your stretch four, and they help them clear their cap space that way. Um, so it's sometimes it's not necessarily a team you anticipate it's going to be. I can do all the research, but then suddenly when a surprise team jumps in on the free agent market, that's how it happens. I'll try to get that updated. It takes an awfully long time, and Basketball Insiders does a good job and some other things. So I'm not sure that that will actually happen, but I would try. Out of curiosity, what happens if a team illegally contacts a free agent before they're supposed to? Another team files a complaint, the league investigates, and then they can lose draft picks or things like that, but it happens all the time. Whether it's as simple as, let's use Gordon Hayward as an example. Mark Bartelstein represented Nick Stoyaskis, Doug McDermott, and another third player in the first round whose name's escaping me right now. So Bartelstein is on the phone with Atlanta, who's got this 15th pick or whatever it was they used for Adrian Payne in the draft, and they're talking about bringing in McDermott or Stoyaskis for a workout, and Bartelstein and them start talking about their need for a small forward. Damari's nice, but we like, and then hey, you got some cap space. Bartelstein just simply says, you got some cap space, and I remember I represent Gordon, and they know that obviously, or they can hold this whole open conversation about, we're really trying to fill our small forward need. McDermott would be nice, but we probably still need to do something in free agency, and we've got $18 million of cap space, so that's really probably somewhere we're looking to see if we can fit somebody in around at $11 or $12 million at that position, if we can find one of the top tier small forwards. And Bartelstein knows exactly what they're talking about. No one ever mentions a name. It's not by definition tampering, but it's completely tampering. So everybody knows. I mean, if you watched the Twitter last night, there were 13 calls in for Trevor Ariza before by 10:15. Okay, well, it's actually humanly impossible to have that happen. So that's not tampering, but it's clear that everybody knows who. It's why actually someone like Trey Burke, whose dad is his agent, it's really a mistake. The agents actually do have enormous value in this league for their clients. What do you think the Jazz would have taken if they were able to trade to the number one pick, Parker or Wiggins? I think Parker. I think they need a scorer, and I think they knew it. Wiggins is going to be I love Wiggins, but Wiggins is going to be a very interesting player to watch. This draft prospect class is going to have some very interesting players to watch over the future, particularly Wiggins in the sense that analytically he's not very popular, and he doesn't show up analytically on anything in any way as a top 10 player in this draft. And if he doesn't break through and he just becomes an average NBA player, then I think it's going to be a really big sign for analytics that they actually are onto something on how you evaluate talent in an NBA draft through numbers, because of the fact if Marcus Smart breaks through, that's equally as big because Marcus Smart was a big numbers guy. Are we going to see the Jazz pick up a player with 1 year remaining on their deal like they did with Golden State last year, Boozer perhaps? Yeah, I mean, that's the whole, you may have asked that question before, and that's the whole analysis of absorbing. Pay the big boys, outspend for your role players, absorb. Those are your three choices. I'm of the absorb, get some more assets. I think Orlando, Philly, and Utah are in the market for salary dump asset grab, but I only see Chicago and Houston as having assets worth dumping for. Chicago, Mirchik, Houston, and New Orleans, number one. Maybe. I mean, this is, Dennis was ahead of the curve last year. Other teams are now going to follow that lead. Dennis swooped in and did something last year that other teams really had not done a lot of yet and had used that very well. Got us Rodney Hood, and we'll see what it gets us in 2017. And frankly, got us Richard Jefferson last year, which we would have had to pay some way. There's no need to go pay for that player if you can just go acquire him. Any ideas on free agents the Jazz are targeting? I think Joe asked these questions prior to the show since I did answer that. But I think on the mid-level, the shooting bigs, Marvin starts it off, and then you're talking Spencer Hawes, Josh McRoberts. On the high level of players, Patrick Patterson. Then the next tier is Trevor Booker, Mike Scott, and Ryan Kelly. Your wings are probably Jody Meeks and Anthony Morrow, possibly Richard Jefferson again, and your point guard is some veteran point guard, maybe on another roster, but the free agents, Luke Ridnour would be a possibility. From Hal Sanderson, how many minutes does Rudy Gobert need to develop this year? I mean, the old game with rookies is you want, particularly rookies is 1,200, 1,800, 2,400. That's your hope on players. If you have a wing player who's higher than that, you'd like to go 1,800, 2,400, 3,200. 3,200 minutes is a lot. That's 35 a night. So that's a little bit of a stretch. So, but if you can go to 1,800, which is 20 some odd minutes a night, your first year as a wing player, 2,400, and then to maybe 28, 2,900, 3,000. That's a great progression for a 3-year high-level marquee player. The Jazz have been behind that the last few years with their players. Gobert is a little different because he's developing big. So then you kind of get into 800 to 1,200 your first year, 1,600 to 1,800 your second year, and if you can get to 2,000 or 2,400 your third year, um, then you're then you're probably better off. And with that said, I don't know what Rudy played last year, so let me try to pull that up, and then I also am going to look at see how far behind Cantor is on that because we definitely have not, we haven't thrown our bigs just out there to play, so some of those guys are behind on that. Gobert last year played 434 minutes, so he was definitely below the 800 in his first year. So if he's below the 800, trying to get him to 1,200 would probably be um, a nice number for him this year. 1,200 is 10 to 15 minutes a night. If you can get him up to a little bit more, that would be terrific. But that's where you head. Cantor was 800 his first year. Then his second year, he dropped. He would have hit the 1,200. Cantor's actually not that far off. Cantor 800 his first year was 1,200 his second year, except for he got injured, right? So he drops to 1,100 and then 2,100 last year. So Cantor actually is right on pace where you'd want him to be, and I would hope that then takes a nice little jump this year. Cantor averaged 12 points, 8 rebounds last year. Numbers on our team last year, though, are so hard to decipher what they actually mean when you are as bad as we were. Will the Jazz organization sign players to try and win more games this year or just take whatever the core can provide to get another lottery pick? I don't know. What do you think the best answer is? Um, what's your thought on that? What should we do? Does it matter to you if we go up to? We're not going to make the playoffs. We didn't add any wins on draft night. So do you want to go sign to? You want to use your 20 million in cap space to go try to sign? I don't know. Let's go take the Wizards. Trevor Ariza and Marcin Gortat. Roll out with Trey Gordon, Trevor Ariza, Derek Favors, Marcin Gortat with Ennis and Gobert off your bench. Burks and Exum off your bench. Probably Kirk Heinrich. Try to acquire some Luke Ridnour as your backup point guard and try to win 35, 38 games next year. Or are you better off letting everyone develop and then try to continue this asset accumulation mode until the day comes where you can piece everyone together? That's the decision that's being made in the front office right now. I hear so much about Tomek. Any validity in it? Honestly, I don't know. Here's the tip. He's I think 26, 27 years old now. So at some point, if he's going to come over, he's got to come. If he's going to do this, this is the time to play. He probably classifies somewhat. He's 27 as a shooting big. So if we can't acquire one of the guys we've just mentioned, he probably becomes a decent choice in that. He didn't shoot threes last year at all, so calling him a shooting big is a little questionable, but he's not a back to the basket power player. He's 7'1". He's a decent passer. I think he averaged 3 or 4 assists a game last year. I think he was playing for FC Barcelona. Boy, I'm not up on my Ante Tomek. For those who don't know, Ante Tomek is a second-round draft pick the Jazz drafted a few years back. He actually was a point guard as a kid and then grew into kind of a 7'1" kid still with point guard skills. He since has done a nice job of building up his body to become a little bit more agile and stronger. He's got a nice dribble game for a big guy, can straighten up and play, might actually be decent in that regard. He's probably a backup big, third, fourth big. But he's an average rebounder. He gets about 5 rebounds a game, about 2 or 3 assists a game. He's an okay shooter. His shooting percentage has increased each and every year, which has been interesting to see. But he has not stretched it out to be a 3-point shooter. And I don't know the players that he the quality of teams they're playing. The Europeans kind of a funny way they do things. But he had a decent Final Four this year, if I remember correctly, on how he played in some of the games, which was their big games. So he's an interesting. At some point, he's got to come over. You got to pay him more than you would just a regular draft pick because you're signing him to a contract now, rather than signing him to a rookie contract. You're signing him to a real deal, and so we just have to figure out what his numbers. But it might be the right time if we don't sign other players. He really might be. It might be the right time. He's the best way to describe him. He's probably a poor man's Pau Gasol. He's not particularly tough. So there. I mean, he might be. He's another very young, inexperienced player. Let's go to Jason for 2, and then wrap it up. They're losing 3 free agents that played minutes: Hayward, Marvin, and RJ. They'll re-sign G. I understand re-signing Marvin, but shouldn't these assets get developmental minutes? Well, I mean, it depends what your viewpoint is. We got to have a veteran small forward. We got to have a veteran wing on the roster. I mean, I can't explain to you how often it's important to have that guy around to explain something, for a player to go to that play, for a coach to use that guy to communicate to players. You almost have to have a veteran to each position group. It's really important. I mean, I can't tell you about the amount of times Alec Burks didn't understand something, went to Richard Jefferson because he doesn't want to go to the coach in an embarrassed fashion and say what's going on. So those things are pretty important. Does it get minutes? Does he beat out Rodney Hood? Maybe he does, but I don't think. I think you'll see a better relationship between coach and general manager on development of players than we've had the last few years. Can't re-sign Marvin. I like Anthony Tolliver. That's another name I should put in there. You're right. So he's not been very good recently. Eric Murphy or Malcolm Thomas, I would guess, makes our roster. When I put our roster down, I have Eric Murphy or Malcolm Thomas down as guys who would probably make the roster. One last question. Sorry, just got in. Don't the Jazz need another point guard? Exum can take all the minutes at both guard spots off the bench. Don't they need a point? Yep, they sure do. They certainly do need a backup point guard that can give them 10 to 15 minutes. John Lucas is on the roster right now. I'm not sure he'll be the guy, but there aren't a lot out there. But you're absolutely right. That's one of the free agent positions. All right, that wraps up. You guys are incredible. We just banged out 42 minutes again. Every day there's the demand. You guys are amazing. Thanks so much. Thanks for taking Locked On Jazz to heights I don't think we ever anticipated it was going to go to. I really appreciate it. We'll keep it up. I'll be with you tomorrow, and I'll be with you Thursday. Then Friday's the 4th. So unless there's breaking news, then I'm off for a little while. So thanks very much.